More people braved the rain today than I expected. I'm glad to see you all. Well, welcome to our May 5th, 2025 Colonial Classics meeting. This meeting is being recorded and you can look at it on our YouTube channel later. And the YouTube channel address is printed in our newsletter. So I'm going to call the meeting to order at 11:04-ish a.m. My name is Marcia Hildebrand, and before we start any of our other business today, we're going to have installation of officers for the 2025-26 year. Pastor Dan was looking forward to being here, but unfortunately he had a scooter accident yesterday, kind of messed himself up, and he was in the hospital for a while, but he's home just in a lot of pain. I think his shoulder, is it his shoulder that, yeah, caused. But so, I mean, when you're an adult playing on a scooter, you kind of get what you deserve, I guess. But I think it was a lot of fun for a while. But anyway, he sends his greetings, but so we'll keep him. Yeah, yeah. How's the scooter? I mean, we want to make sure Jesse still has something to play with, right? Yeah. All right, so with that, we're going to start our installation process. It's just going to be very quick and easy. We have all the exact same people who are being reinstalled this year, but we want to give them our blessing for a new year and thank them for the year of service. So I'm going to, as I call your name, I'd like you to come up and stand up here, but maybe over on David's side over here so you can get a good picture of everybody. So the officers being installed at this time are the executive board members at large, and they are Cynthia Duval, Robert Herrick, and Barbara Moore. You all could come up and stay up here until we get all our officers. Cynthia, Robert, and Barbara, it's your duty to attend the board meetings, act as liaison between membership and the board, and participate in the administrative affairs of the organization. So for the rest of you, if you have anything you want, any issues you want brought up, any comments, suggestions, you can give those ideas to any of these board members. They'll bring them together when we meet as a board and help kind of to make those things happen for you. Our treasurer is Lois Armour. Lois is in charge of receipts and disbursements of the Colonial Classics funds. She helps with us to create an annual budget and maintains accurate records of our funds. Thank you, Lois. Secretary Christine Schemmel has the task of documenting the history of the organization by keeping minutes or recordings of general meetings and executive board meetings. Thank you for your service, Christine. And our vice president, again, is Tony Hayes. Tony is my right-hand person. She provides support by assisting with any assigned duties, and in the absence of the president, performs all duties as required. And then I guess next is me. I'm going to be president again for one more year. And my job is to prepare agenda material and preside at the meetings of the executive board and the monthly meetings of this general membership. So this is our executive board. All right, thank you. And then I also want to recognize the members who are serving in various committees and other leaders of classics. And that includes our program committee, David Dixon, Tony Hayes, and Maria Solis. Why don't you all come up too? David, Tony, and Maria. They're our program committee, and working as a team, they will arrange speakers or entertainment for our monthly meetings. So, uh-oh, what's the matter, Tony? Did you lose your spot? Oh, well, come back up. Come back up. So you could be with the program committee. So any suggestions that you may have for programs or speakers, you can talk to anyone of this committee, and we'll see if we can fit them in. And then our food committee is probably hard at work. They are Aida Alonso, Rebecca Davis, and Patty King. So Aida, Rebecca, and Patty. And these ladies work to organize lunches to follow monthly meetings, sometimes here, sometimes at a restaurant. Is Aida out there? We can get your picture later. We'll recognize you and thank you, and we can get your picture at lunchtime. They're already hard at work. And then membership this year is Judy Phillips. Judy, why don't you come on up? Judy will keep updated records of dues paid, birthdays, and email addresses for all members. And why don't you stay up here while we have a couple others come? Devotions, Larry Kinter and Lynn Berry. Come on up. Why not? Larry will open our monthly meetings with an inspirational message, and Lynn will close our monthly meetings with a blessing to send us out and bless our lunch. AV and Zoom is Robert Herrick. Robert, do you have a minute to come back to the front? And Robert is our host and recorder of our meetings on Zoom, and he assists in the smooth operation of audio, visual, and computer needs at our meetings. Birthdays, Adana Hilkemeyer. Adana at monthly meetings provides and presents flowers for members celebrating their birthdays during that month. And last but not least, David, can you get up here and still get your picture? Okay. David Eyre is our photographer, and he takes pictures during meetings and special events to provide photos for monthly newsletters. And this is our other support people. So once you get a picture, we'll thank you all for your hard work, and you can be seated. It's a brand new year. We're off to 25-26. I think that's kind of exciting. All right, so we're officially installed, commissioned, whatever you want to call that, and we'll ask Larry to come and give us some opening thoughts for our May meeting. There you go, everybody. We had an exercise class not long ago. Like, how many times can you stand up and sit down? All right, Larry.
Gee, I kind of lucked in and making it short and sweet today. So a college professor got up and said, if God really exists, then let him knock me out of my chair. Nothing happened. The class was silent. He said, now I will give you 2 more minutes. A Marine veteran stood up, punched him in the face, knocking him out and off his chair, then sat back down. As the professor came to, he looked at his student and said, why did you do that? The Marine said, God was busy protecting my buddies, still fighting for your right to say and do stupid stuff like this. So he sent me.
All right, thank you. And then Judy, why don't you come up to give our membership report? Lois, you can come too for our treasurer's report, and then we'll follow that quickly with our birthdays. We want to get to our program.
Today we have 26 members and 1 guest, unless I missed anybody. Do we have any more guests? That's it then.
I saw Reed sneak in after we counted, so that was 1 more. So we have 27 members present. We have received $575 in dues paid, so we have a total of $877.34 in the bank now. I have received 3 more today, and that brings our membership up to 25, 27, 20, 23, 24, 26.
And we only have two birthdays in May. One is for Patty King, whose birthday was May 1st, and Blanche Reed, whose birthday is the 27th. If they will come up and collect their posies and we can sing happy birthday. Okay. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay, thank you. Here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear classics. Happy birthday to you. And many more. Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, we're gonna quickly run through our old business. Today is the last day for the diaper drive. Make sure to check with Judy Phillips if you have any contact information that needs to be updated. And see Lois Armour if you haven't yet paid your annual dues for this year. Any other old business anybody has? Yes, Christine. Yes, that will be new business. We'll talk about that next, but great. The next thing that we really want to get to is our proposed budget for this year. I'm sorry there's so much business, Molly. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. But we have a slide for our proposed budget that the executive board worked on. I will run through it for you. We projected an estimated 30 members, and dues at $25 each brings us to $750 income, and we're already pretty close to our 30. But if you can encourage other people to join, that'll give us a little bit more of a cushion there. Our expenses include the Gifts of the Heart cards once a month for our speakers, any other program honorariums that we might have someone come and speak that requires a fee. Speaker lunches if we take our presenter out to a restaurant with us and pay for their meal. The food committee has $200 in their budget to help provide food when we have it here at the church. And then discretionary expenses are things that we'll talk about as the year goes along to bring it to a balance of $750. So is there any discussion about that budget, or does someone make a motion to approve this budget as recommended? Who is the second, Barbara? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? All right, great. And as Christine mentioned, our donation for summer is going to be men's t-shirts, new or like new, that we'll give to inner city development. That is one of the items on their wish list. They like to give out t-shirts to folks that need them. So you can bring your men's t-shirts, new or like new, to the meetings in June, July, and August. Yes, Nancy. Anyone, any.
Exercise, yeah.
Yeah. It could be.
Are you looking for white ones or
Yeah,
any?
it could be
nude?
any color. Probably like if it has a logo or something on it, like, I don't know, just make sure it's appropriate. All right, I think does anybody else have any business to discuss? If not, I'll turn the meeting over to Molly. Molly Keck is a church member. Those of you that were here a year or so ago, remember she came and talked to us about some of the bugs in our yard, and it sort of freaked you out, but she's very fascinating and a great presenter. Today, Molly's specialty is on bees and beekeeping. So Molly, welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to actually, because I'm going to be up and back, so I'm going to hold this if that's okay. So my name is Molly Keck. I work for the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and we are an outreach education. We're part of the A&M system, but we're the outreach part of the A&M system. So we go out into the community, or we put on programs that the community tells us they are wanting or needing. So I thought my intention was to get into a hive and pull out a frame of bees, but this is the worst weather to do that in, because you can't really get them wet. Once you open it, you can't get them wet. They'll get chilled. They get, it's just not good. So I brought a bunch of stuff instead and figured instead of that show and tell, I have some other show and tell, but also kind of talk about our beekeeping program and the history of where that started and how I started doing beekeeping and all that kind of stuff. So if you talk to people who have well, if you talk to anybody, anyone that comes to my classes will say, oh, my grandparents did beekeeping, or my dad did beekeeping, or, I knew my neighbor had one when I was a kid. And then there was this kind of lapse when people did beekeeping, and it really plummeted it with backyard beekeepers really around the 90s. So in the 80s, we ended up getting this little mite that is small to our eyes, but to the size of a bee, it's akin to us having like a squirrel attached to us. And that thing gives all these nasty viruses to bees. We're still fighting these things today. If a beehive dies, when probably 1,000% of the time it's because of varroa mites, although beekeepers usually blame everything else. So that made it really different to keep bees in the United States around the 80s when that mite came in, and people just stopped doing it because it was too costly. It didn't work. We didn't know how to fight these varroa mites. We kind of do now, but we still don't do a good job of it. And then in the 90s, that's really when backyard beekeeping went away, because in the 90s was when these Africanized bees made their way into the United States. Texas can be proud to say that we're the first state to ever have an established colony of Africanized bees. And Africanized bees are honeybees. They are just a subspecies or a race of bees that exhibit undesirable traits as a beekeeper. So I think of bees, if you think of bees as like dogs, there's all different breeds of dogs that we have for different things, for guarding, for being a family pet, for being a lap dog, for whatever, right? For the way it looks. Bees are kind of the same way. We can breed bees and make different hybrids of bees to be more gentle, or to make more honey, or be better at producing wax, or different things like that. So Africanized bees, the story with that, there was a guy named Warwick Kerr who was from Brazil. I think he was German, but he lived in Brazil or something like that. And he was like a geneticist down there. He wasn't an entomologist, and he wasn't really a beekeeper, I don't believe. But Brazil was not competing with the rest of the world for honey production. And it was because all of our bees are European bees. And so down in that southern hemisphere, they just were not tolerating their humidity and their weather. And so he went to Africa and he bred a hybrid. He took African bees with European bees and he made this hybrid bee. And after he had made these queens, he came back into the United States, and he did this in the 50s or the 60s. So this is way before they really checked your luggage very carefully, right? So he brought like 35 queen Africanized hybrid bees into Brazil. Only 20 something of them survived, and he had them out in the field. And one of the characteristics of these Africanized bees is that they'll want to leave. They're tramps. They just want to leave their house and make a new house, in addition to being really aggressive and some other things. So he had a beekeeper managing these bees, and he had the queens in cages so they couldn't leave the colony. Well, that beekeeper didn't like the cages. They got in his way. And I guess he didn't know what was going on out there. And so he took the cages off, and those queens left with a bunch of their babies, and they started spreading through Brazil, throughout South America, hit Central America, Mexico, and then made it into Texas in the 90s. And these bees are mean. And they're still mean today. We're just kind of used to it, I think. And so in the 90s, when they made it into South Texas, just Texas beekeepers stopped doing it because it wasn't fun anymore. We were getting stung. You had to wear a suit every time you were out there. I think today our Africanized bees are a little diluted in the meanness because there's so many more people doing beekeeping that we're diluting that aggressive trait. But we still do have aggressive bees. And then you guys might remember in 2006, colony collapse disorder had this name. It was all in the media. And if I'm a backyard beekeeper and I have 10 hives and I lose 2% of my hives, or even 40% of my hives, it's not that bad. It's what we normally see. But if you have hundreds or thousands of hives and you're losing 40%, that's really bad, right? So, and it was just this phenomenon where bees were just dying off. The queen might be there still, but she had this weak hive. And there's a lot of reasons why they went through colony collapse. A lot of it had to do with those varroa mites. So then in 2012, the tax code changed, where if you have a minimum of 5 acres without your house on it, so if you have a house, you need 6, a maximum of 20 acres, you can pretend like bees are cattle. They can be livestock now. So they've been added to the tax code so that you can use them as livestock for your ag valuation, or commonly referred to as ag exemption, right? You're not exempt from taxes, but you get a reduction in your taxes on the property. So people started calling into the office and saying, what resources do we have And they were prior to that, but we didn't have anything in extension. And so I started thinking, we got to start doing some sort of a beekeeping class because a true extension program, right? People are calling, there's a need for it. In addition to that, sea colony collapse was in the media. Everybody wanted to save the bees. How can we do it? We can have a beehive in our backyard. And so, and also a lot of people were doing this. That was when everyone was calling, canning their own, things we've done forever. But when they started canning and they started growing their own vegetables, they were homesteading, right? Trying to kind of not really live off the grid, but support themselves in that way. So everybody was interested in beekeeping. And so I reached out to a volunteer, a 4-H parent who I knew he was a beekeeper. And I said, let's develop a class. And he taught me to do beekeeping. So I've been beekeeping since 2012, and we've been doing classes since then, every spring and every fall. And then even since then, there's a group called the Texas Beekeepers Association who lobbied with legislators to get money to have an apiculture program in extension. So we have a specialist who's this, I mean, he's like so smart with beekeeping. And then I do a little bit of it. And then we have 2 other people in Dallas and Houston to do some beekeeping 101 and help commercial. I don't do commercial because I'm not that good at it, but backyard beekeepers and up to commercial beekeepers. So if you're a beekeeper, there's a few things that you need. There's actually a lot of stuff that you need. And it's kind of like any hobby where you start buying stuff and then you end up having to build a storage shed to put all your stuff in, right? There's tons of stuff. Initially, you get a few things, and like kind of what's up here is the basics of beekeeping. And then you start buying toys and adding to it. So you've got to have some sort of protective clothing. You have to have the stuff, the house to put the bees into, and the tools to work the bees. You have to have a place to put the bees, and then you have to have the time to kind of manage the bees too, because it's not, you think, well, in nature, they do it on their own. But in nature, are they naturally in your backyard or your property? Probably not. And if I've got 10 hives on 5 acres, in nature, they would never be that dense. So you have to work your bees and take care of them and maintain them, and just like you would any kind of livestock. So beekeeping equipment ranges from the really brave people that might just wear like a veil like this. I wear, so there's like, you either, like with all allergies and exposures, right? You either become a little more immune or you become very sensitive. And I was the latter. And so I will not go out without a full suit on, or it's like certain death, right? So, and it's my job too. So I could just stop keeping bees, but I like doing the classes. So anyway, this is just a veil that you would put over your head, and all it really protects is your face. So you'd never see me in just this. I would always wear something else. And I don't know if y'all want to touch and feel and put those on, but that's a bee veil. Sometimes they just have jackets. So you could just wear your regular pants and then it's like a hoodie, but it has the veil on it. And then what I wear is a full entire suit. And this is not my suit, but it's an example of a suit. And this one is this is called a vented suit. You can kind of see through it. It's 2 pieces inside and outside of this mesh fabric, but inside the stuff in there is like that stuff you put down underneath your rugs. It's kind of like plasticky, rubbery, sticky stuff. And it actually is thicker than what they're wearing up there, which is just a canvas suit. But also you get some airflow because it may not feel that hot outside, but when you're wearing this and you're picking stuff up, you're sweating a lot. So most beekeepers have switched to these vented suits, which were new like 12 years ago when I started. This was like expensive and really, really nice and fancy to have. Now pretty much everybody has it, but it's heavy too. So like you gain, I don't know, a few pounds when you put on those clothes. And then, of course, you have to wear gloves. I don't have a picture of gloves. Beekeeping gloves are usually really long, and you wear it like over your elbow, and it's, elastic is in there, so it holds real tight. So they can't squeeze inside and get you. And the gloves are made out of different things. It can be leather, cow skin, or it can be goat skin, or you can do rubber or something like that. And I always have people say, "Oh, I'll just use my gardening gloves. They're thick enough." Or, "Oh, these look like, carpenter or my fencing gloves, my work gloves." And I will just say that a lot of these things look like they could be something else, but beekeeping is the oldest hobby in the world, and we have beekeeping equipment for a reason. So if you're going to do beekeeping, buy the beekeeping stuff and don't try to piece it together with what you've already got at home. Plus, your gloves get really, really filthy. Those suits will last you a really, really long time. My suit, I just recently bought myself a new suit, so 12 years. No, it's not 20, it's like been 13 years, right? Since 20, a year has passed since I guess the last time I gave this spiel. So my suit lasted, I don't know, it lasted a really long time, but then my zipper, the prongs of the zipper broke. And so I was out there one day and I was moving and they got into, I didn't know it was opening and they got in and stung me. And that's when I realized I had developed an allergy. So only thing I had to do was get the zipper replaced. And then I've replaced my suit, but it still works only because the elastic wears out. So your suit lasts a really long time. Gloves, they say to replace those every couple of years because you'll get toxins and just junk gets absorbed in that leather. But most equipment should last you a long time if you take care of it. And then you need a house to put your bees in. Most beekeepers that like the industry standard are these white boxes that are called Langstroth hives, or that's the one on the left. There are some other different types of boxes. The middle one's called a top bar hive. If you know much about, if you've heard or read about beekeeping, you've probably heard about that. It's just like a horse trough, kind of. It's, tapered, and all it has is little wooden bars that go across that rest on the top, and the bees build their comb naturally on that. So it's not, you wouldn't use that if you're in it for honey production or anything like that. And then the one on the right is called a Warre hive, and we don't really use those in Texas because it's really meant for very wet places. So probably more like on the East Coast, maybe on the far Northwest coast, but we're just so darn dry that, it's not really needed. So most boxes look like those Langstroth hives. And if you build a Langstroth hive kind of from the ground up, there's a lot of different components. So this box right here is not, it's got two boxes on it, but it's only one single hive. It's just like our house. We have a foundation and we have a front door and we have one roof, right? If you have two front doors, then you have a duplex. Well, there's only one front door on here. And some houses have 3 stories, right? Some are gigantic, some are smaller, but it's still one single house, one single residence, right? So this is just a 2-story single resident beekeeping or bee house. So you starting kind of from the ground up, you've got some sort of a stand because they're not very tall, and you get termites that eat up that wood. Most of the equipment is just built out of pine because it's cheap, and but it's also very imperfect and very yummy to termites. So I put mine on like cinder blocks. So they're raised up so I don't kill my back bending over to mess with them all the time. And then you'll have a bottom board or a solid board on the very, very bottom. Sometimes it's got a screen in it, but that's your foundation for your house. And it kind of, I guess on cinder block, I'm on pier and beam, right? And then on top of that are your what are called brood boxes. So the very, very first box of or first box from the ground up of your hive is called a brood box. Brood are the babies. Brood means eggs, larvae, pupa. And our queen is going to lay primarily in that brood box. And she's going to they're going to build comb on it, and she's going to start laying eggs in it. And then as that grows and fills up and you look in and you see all those frames are full, you'll add another box on top. And that becomes a super. And it just because it supersedes what's below. And your supers can be whatever you want it to be. It can be a medium like this one is, or it can be another big deep one on top. And then you have your roof on top of that. And this kind of roof is called a telescoping cover, so that the water, I think it's really meant for water to kind of wash off of it. So that hive right there, one of my hives is on cinder blocks, so it's not on the ground, a couple cinder blocks piled up. There's a deep brood box. The first box there is a deep, and then the one on top of it is a medium. And then on top of that is another one that's called it's actually just a feeder, but it's called a honey super. And they're itty bitty, teeny tiny. Most beekeepers don't use them anymore. So probably what's going on in this hive, I don't know if that'll work. Yeah. So she's laying a bunch of eggs inside here. And let's say it's this time of year. She's probably filled out most of this box with babies. And then she'll start to lay a little bit in the center here, but it's primarily food. And if this was a box with frames in it, this would primarily just be food up at the very top. So she builds below and you let her grow. And if you want to get honey from her, we have these special things that called a queen excluder. It's just like a big grate. It's got little slits in it that only the workers can crawl through, but the queen can't. So she's trapped below it and she can only lay eggs down below. And so then the workers just do honey up above. So you don't steal honey and kill a bunch of babies. You only steal honey. So there's some of the, you can see some of the shapes of the deeps, mediums, and shallows. And then inside of them, you see you've got these frames that are hanging vertically inside there, and they are going to correspond with the size of the box that it's in. Because if I used too small of a frame, or too short, I guess, of a frame in a deep box, so like this frame, it fits in that box. If it was here, there's, I don't know what, like 2-3 inches of space. And they would build burr comb on that. They don't, so bees are interesting. These Langstroth hives were developed by a Reverend Lorenzo Langstroth in the 1800s, I think, mid 1800s. And he discovered that that bees have a bee space. And so it's a space that is, if it's too small where they can't squeeze their body through, they'll propolis it. Propolis is their version of glue that they make themselves. It's bee resin, a little bit of honey probably, and wax. And so they make this caulk. It's like, we caulk and seal things up. Well, they propolis it. And if the space is too big, then they will build comb in that space. So the whole hive, everything, the space from the bottom board to where the bottom of the frames are, between the boxes, between where the frames sit, it utilizes that bee space. It doesn't get too small and it doesn't get too big, or you have a big giant mess inside your hive when you're trying to get inside there. So I don't know if y'all can, it's kind of, they just dangle vertically, and then the bees draw comb. Drawing comb means they're building comb off of it. And then these frames start out usually, most beekeepers will use like a plastic foundation, has little hexagons as like a template to get them to build comb the right way. You can get different sized foundations to make them build drone comb, which are the boys, and they're in a bigger space. But that's just regular old, that when they draw comb off of that, they'll either put eggs in it, store pollen, or they'll put nectar in it, which is what turns into honey later on. And then as they work on it and they draw comb, I had a good one in here. Where'd it go? Here it is. So here's one where they just started to draw a little bit of comb on it. And it's been in storage. It didn't really smell like honey, but it smells like something. Yeah, it's probably more that. And then this one smells a little sweeter. This is filthy, gross, and dirty, and we had wax moths get into our storage shed, but this is a fuller, it's imperfect, but it's a fuller frame. So that's all wax. And just like we build our houses and our structures out of wood and nails, and we put up sheetrock, the construction they use for their house is comb. So there's honeycomb, but it's where they're storing honey. And then there's brood comb, and that's just where they're putting babies. But I could take that and put it in a hive, an existing hive, and they'll just put whatever they need to put in it. So it's, like, it's not all honey. Everyone says honeycomb. Oh, it's honeycomb, but it's just comb. What they put in it makes it honey or something else. And so like these, we already kind of talked about that, but as they grow, they need more space. And so that one on the right is just a four-story house. So that's a mansion. And then the one below is just a regular old, single family house, two-story house. So it just depends on how many babies they're making, how good that queen is, how much space they need. But it's not 4 different colonies. That's just one single house. It's got to be a whole separate thing because inside of there are 4 queens. And that queen, well, you can see, it's not solid at the bottom. So that queen can move up and down and up and down and lay eggs wherever she wants to. There's nothing, if we had something in there separating her and we had another queen, then yeah, that would be 2 different colonies, but that we don't build colonies like that. We just do another one right beside it. And every colony only has 1 queen. If that queen gets old, she will either get killed by her workers, or if we don't give them enough space, and you can see all these, this is not really truly bearding, but especially in the summer when they're hot, they kind of take a while to go back home. But if let's pretend it's so full they can't fit inside there, they will produce a new queen. The old queen leaves with half of the colony and goes and finds another place like your chimney or under the soffits of your house. That's when they get into things. And it's nice. The old queen leaves behind a home for her new baby queen to live in. And so then you also need some tools, and there's lots of fun stuff and fun tools that you can use. But the 3 basic tools that most people use, the first, you have to have some sort of a hive tool. So these are 2 different types of hive tools. They're filthy because they have wax on them, and they get sticky because you smush them and you get honey on them. And I don't know how I did that, but this one's chipped even though it's metal. And you use and they're kind of sharp, so be careful. There's a really, really old inspector from the Texas Apiary Inspection Service, and he'll say, I guess he's from a small town where they don't have soft pews, they have hard pews. But he'll say, the beekeepers on Sunday morning because they sit down and their hive tool makes noise on the pew. I guess beekeepers would carry it with them anywhere. I think the point he makes when he says that is that you cannot get into your hive without those hive tools. I have to turn back around and go back if I've forgotten it, and I've done that before. The other stuff you can get by with bee brushes. So I don't know if I have a video of it. I kind of do. So when this gets lifted up, you will see that brown stuff, kind of that's on the edge there. That's propolis, and that's really, really sticky. And I would not be able to, like, I just lifted that off of there. You can't do that in a living hive because they've sealed it so tight. So you have to take your hive tool and you have to pry it, and they call it cracking open the hive. To get the frames out, you can't just lift them out. You have to use your hive tool to push them apart from one another because anything that touches is propolized. Everything gets stuck together and glued. And that propolis also has a lot of antimicrobial properties. A lot of beekeepers will scrape it, clean it somehow, and then I guess you eat it. They could turn it into like salves and things like that, but I'm sure you could eat it too. And then you got to have a smoker. The urban legend, I guess, is that the smoke makes them think there's a wildfire, and so they go into their hive and they engorge themselves with honey, and then they can't fly. But if you think about it, then all the bees would die in a wildfire. So that's stupid. It's not that's not natural selection would have knocked those guys out, right? So what really the smoke does is all insects communicate and talk with their little antenna. And so they smell with their antenna. That's how they communicate. So if all they can smell is smoke, then they can't say, oh, there's an enemy coming into my hive, or let's sting. Or if one does sting you, they all smell it and they'll come and they'll sting at the same spot. So if you ever get stung by a bee and you're close to their hive, go away because they're all going to come out and sting you over and over again. But the smoke will mask that. And so it calms them down. It also pushes them out of the way. And you can use whatever you want to smoke. You can buy, I always think that it's not on fire, it's just got a lot of ash in there. You can buy baggies of cotton, and I'm always thinking that people in Lubbock and West Texas are like, people buy this? This is on the side of the road. You can put burlap. I just put, moss and whatever stuff I find around my around my yard. Anything that produces a smoke is what you use. Um, and it can either be, I don't know if that one is, that actually I think is the same, exact same one. If you listen to WAI on Saturday mornings, I think, that's David Rodriguez right there. He does a garden show. Oh, that did funny. And so when you smoke them, you crack open the lid and you smoke them and they'll start to move into the hive and get out of your way so that you can see what you're looking at on the frames because you're not really looking at workers. And then another thing that you might use is a bee brush. You just would like you flick it and you move the bees off of frames and things like that. I don't use my bee brush very much. This was always my kids' job was to hold the bee brush because it wasn't ever used, but they felt like they were doing something. And then when I started beekeeping, what really shocked me was that you can't just put a box out. Well, you can put a box out and you can pray that a queen goes in there and a hive moves in, but most likely they won't. You can buy things like lemongrass is supposed to mimic a pheromone a swarm pheromone. So a swarm like the hive that got too big and they took off, they might come swarm into there. There's pheromones that you can purchase and you can put in there. But most of the time, beekeepers will purchase bees. You'll buy your own bees from a commercial beekeeper. And you want to do that because you want to control the genetics. You want to know, what is this queen? Is it a gentle type of queen? So you don't end up in a situation that's not so much fun. And so the two main options, if you don't buy a full hive, is you can buy a package of bees. So a package of bees is 3 pounds of bees that have been funneled into a box. And this is sitting on my office from years ago. I got 2 packages and I walked in. I used to get them shipped to the office. I do still, because I know someone will accept them and they're not going to, because whoever it's coming from, UPS, USPS, he's going to drop that on your porch and he wants it off his truck, right? So they can end up in the sun and they can get messed up. So I came into my office and I had ordered 2 packages and I kind of forgot they were coming and my door was closed and my door's never closed. And there were chairs and like the chairs were going to stop the bees from getting out. Everyone was scared of them. But it's 3 pounds of bees that have been dumped into this little box and then they put a queen in there. This is usually what a little queen cage. Here's a couple little queen cages. So a queen's inside there and she's just dangling. She's not the mom of those bees, but they will have accepted her by then. So if a queen dies, and as a beekeeper, you can kill the queen and put a new one in, and they don't care. They'll accept any mother. Like they don't have, it's not like people where they know it's not their mother, right? And then you dump it, you take it and you literally do like what she's doing and you dump it into a hive and it's, it's not as scary as you think it is because they're not as mad. Or a lot of people buy these things called nukes or nucleus packages. They're really just miniature hives. So if a good healthy colony is maybe 20 frames, this box is actually an 8-frame box, but most people use a 10-frame box. I just have the 8-frame because it's easier it fits in my cart a lot better and carry around. But if a healthy colony is a deep 10-frame and then like a medium or another deep 10-frame, a nuke being 5 is a quarter of a hive. So it's just a miniature hive that you get up and you get going. And these nukes, depending on what kind of queen you're getting, can be close to $400. So when you hear about people getting upset because their bees died because something happened to them, it's because to replace their colonies is very expensive. And then, just the general things that you do to keep bees. So this time of year, you're probably in your hive like every week. Beekeeping is not necessarily a daily thing unless you have so many hives you can't get through everything at one time. But you check on them about every 1 to 2 weeks in the springtime. Each hive, depending on what you're doing in the hive, could take as little as 20 minutes to as long as an hour. In the summer and the fall, when it gets hot, you're really just checking them every 2 weeks probably. And then most beekeepers have an off season. In Texas, not necessarily, but they usually say we close up our hives, meaning we don't open them and move frames and look at them around Thanksgiving, and then don't reopen them until Valentine's Day. But for me, it's usually like early December is when it starts to cool off enough. Because once the hive keeps a constant temperature of about 90, somewhere between 92 and 96. And so in the winter, even if it's a nice sunny 70-degree day and you open that hive, you've now cooled it down 20 degrees. And that's a lot of work to warm it back up again. So you usually don't open it in the winter time about December until like end of February. But we had a weird year. Everything was behind. And you're checking for all sorts of things. Is my queen in there? Do I see her or do I just see eggs? If I see eggs, I don't care if I see her. Do they need food? Like, do I need to give them supplement, feed them with some sugar water because we're in a nectar dearth? Do they need more space? I might rearrange things so that she lays better. There's all sorts of reasons that you might be checking your bees, definitely checking them for varroa mites or other issues that it looks like they might be having. And if you're into it for the honey production, just go buy honey because it's a lot more expensive. It's not, it's kind of like chickens, right? Like it's not that much, it's really not cheaper to have chickens to produce eggs than it is to just go buy the eggs. I usually tell people, and this was years ago, so I probably, with inflation, I need to go back and figure out prices of things, but usually you want to start with 2 hives because you will learn from each one. One will always be weaker than the other one. They'll have different attitudes. It's just like children. They're totally different. And then you can steal frames. Like if one doesn't have enough food, you can steal a food frame and give it to the weaker hive. Or you can steal brood frame and give them a frame of brood so they have more workers. So two is always good. And once you add everything up, you're probably spending minimum $3,000 on just those 2 hives. So, I mean, unless you eat a lot of honey, you're probably better off just going to the grocery store or a farmer's market. But also some colonies never produce honey. So it's not a surefire thing. Like a chicken's probably always going to produce an egg, right? But they don't always necessarily produce honey. But when they do, it's always in the hottest time of the year. It's sticky as it can be. It's the messiest. It's exciting, but it is filthy, gross, and dirty to extract your honey. And that's a full medium honey frame. It's capped up, which they cap it up when they've taken enough moisture off of it. And so like it comes from the flower like apple juice or like juice consistency. And then they work really hard to pull moisture off of it, which is another reason why summer is usually when they're in honey flow and they're making honey. And once they cap it, now it's the right moisture consistency. And if you were to eat uncapped honey, it's a little tart, but I think it's still sweet to our tongue, but it can crystallize faster. Crystallized honey isn't bad honey. It just has too much moisture. And so it's made crystals. So that's a full frame of honey. And if both sides were like that, that would probably fill up like maybe a ragu jar. Not as much as you probably think it is. But it's still fun to pull those out of the hive. And I think that's the last slide. Oh, I had somebody send me in my classes that we do. So a lot of people live in larger acreage areas, but a lot of people do live in small acreage areas. So these are just some pictures that I had people send me that have them in their backyard. It's doable. There's a good chance someone's keeping bees in your neighborhood and you don't realize it. And sometimes, if people that want to do it, I say, well, give honey to your neighbors and they'll usually forgive you for it. But if you requeen, we tell people kill the queen and put in a new queen every single year so you can control the genetics, because if your queen dies, they produce a little virgin queen. That virgin queen has to go and mate, and she flies up in the air and she mates with all the feral drones that are around, and those are probably Africanized, aggressive. They probably have traits that you don't like. So now she comes back in, and even though she is a purebred, like her mother was Italian or something, and so she's a purebred Italian bee. She's bred with this feral bee, right? And now she's producing these mutts and these bees that may not be very nice, and the hives get hotter. That's what we call it. They get meaner and meaner. So if you requeen, you control that. And if I've got a hive that's mean and I just requeened it, I'm going to kill that queen and put a new one in. The queen is the brain, and if she doesn't do her job, she gets sacked, and I put a new queen in, and they can do the job. These are some other pictures. So like that one, they've got neighbors right behind them. You can see the hives are in their little backyard. And in none of these pictures does it look like they have well manicured, perfect lawns, right? So they've got weeds and they may not mow very much, but that's because bees would get real ticked off. So if you like having a perfect yard, you don't want to keep bees back there because you'll have to mow in your bee suit, and that's not fun in July and August. But these neighbors probably have no idea these bees are there unless she's not giving them water and they have a pool. And that's usually when your neighbors get upset. We do have beekeeping classes. They're done for the spring. I'm all finished up with them for the spring, but we'll pick them up again in the fall. It's just too hot because we'll do a field day out in the bee yard. So you get to put on a bee suit and pick up hives, spot the queen, do some bee work. But once we get into May, you'll have heat stroke, and the liability is too much for me. But we do have an online class that you could watch in the summer. So if you want to know more about beekeeping, that's the website to find the online class. And that's it. And I think this last slide has my email. So if y'all ever have questions, you have my email. Do y'all have any questions? Yes, sir. I didn't bring any honey. I have not pulled honey off of my bees in the past 2 years because it's been so dry that I wanted to leave it all for them so they could have it for the winter, because you can feed them sugar water, but it's like us just eating Snickers, right? We could survive off of it, but it's not a good balanced diet. So I was leaving them honey because I didn't know when we would get out of this drought. But I'm gonna tell you right now, I know we're still in a drought, but we've had this good rain at the right intervals. We have a lot of wildflowers, and I don't know what else is blooming. They're bringing back so much pollen and so much honey that I'm really hoping what this does right now, it's not enough to steal, but it makes them produce a lot of workers. So when we get to July, their population is at their peak, and there's so many workers coming back with food that now they have extra to store. And that's when you pull the honey off of them. Because right now they're on population increase, and anything they bring back, they're probably going to need. I got to wait till they're at peak. And I'm hoping that we don't like have an awful July and August or even June, so I can actually get honey this year, because it's been a long time.
You probably already covered it, but what are their senses to find the pollen? Do they smell it, or
And well, UV light. So they see the flowers have they see in UV instead of the way that we see. So that when flowers open, usually in the middle where the pollen and the nectary is, they just kind of zone in and they can see it differently than we do. So they use their eyes more than anything.
They can see.
Yeah, they can see. And then if they found like a really good, you know how like sometimes when Texas sage blooms and you can like hear the bees buzzing, or there's bees are all over it. Well, when a bee finds a really good resource, it will come back into the colony and it will do it's called a waggle dance. It's like a figure eight. So they do a circle and then they waggle on the figure eight thing. And the direction they waggle is the direction from the sun that the bees need to go and fly, which sounds like that's not that complex maybe, but they're flying horizontal and they're waggling vertically. And so this dumb little bee has to figure out how to do that. And then the intensity of the waggle tells the other bees how good the food is. The length that they're waggling tells them how far they need to go. And then they come back smelling like that flower, and the flowers smell like them. But it's just one bee that comes back to tell. It's like amazing.
What? It's a leader.
Yeah. They're very, very good recruiters to food sources. That's why if they're at your hummingbird feeder and they won't go away, wait till they get enough of that food, and the hummingbirds will survive too. They're not going to sting the hummingbirds, but they're starving. That's why they want it.
You mentioned that it's really not economical to have a beehive for honey.
Just for honey.
Well, why else do you have a beehive?
For the fun. I mean, it's really truly a hobby. You need to there's 3 different types of beekeepers. Backyard beekeepers tend to have 10, 20, less than 100 hives, usually 10 to 20, right? Or even less than that. These are people that do it as a hobby on the weekends. We have a full-time job. There are sideliners. Sideliners will have 100 plus hives, but they have to maintain a full-time job to support themselves. But the bees are like a supplemental thing or a part-time job, right? A commercial beekeeper, the job is the bees, and they have hundreds of hives generally. And so they might be getting wax and selling and making stuff out of the wax from it. Honey, they could be collecting pollen and selling pollen. Or most of them are, well, actually, I'd say 50-50 are taking the bees out to almond orchards or out into the cotton fields in West Texas, and they're using them for pollination. And now there's a lot of beekeepers that are selling equipment and making nukes and packages and selling them to people. So if you're doing it for money, it's like you're farming bees for sure. A hobby is just a hobby.
Oh, sure. I'll just use this one. Molly, I was reading about bees since this month there's like National Bee Day or whatever, and the awareness of the importance of bees, like for food production and pollination and stuff. There were so many facts and figures that I don't remember any of them, but maybe you can talk about like why they're important.
Yeah. So we have a lot of different species of bees, and I was just talking about honeybees. Honeybees are all bees are important, right? But our wildflowers and aesthetics, the things that we like to look at, those are primarily pollinated by native bees. Honeybees are excellent. The way that they recruit, the size of their hive, the best things that they will pollinate are ag systems, or if you have a field of, they like the same kind of food at one time. So a field of bluebonnets, they'll go after that. But they're excellent at ag production and pollinating. So I think that the last statistic I saw was that bees are worth over $1 billion annually by contributing to crop yield and crop quality. Well, I mean, the grocery store is a lot more expensive than it was, so I bet we could make that maybe another billion probably. But then that doesn't even take into account the things that we look at, like pollinating those bluebonnets for us and the value of those aesthetics, right? And they also say, so there's 90% of plants require an animal to pollinate it. There are over 100,000 different pollinating animals, but only 1,000 are not insects. And honeybees are just the most efficient at pollinating monocultures like ag systems. So they're very, very valuable. If we didn't have bees, they say you could say goodbye to a third of your plate. You know, think a bee for every bite, every 3 bites you take, you think a bee for it. Every fruit, every vegetable, almonds for sure. We'd eat a lot of wheat and a lot of corn because those are wind pollinated. But any fruit and vegetable is definitely due to a honeybee pollinating it. Even in your own garden. One and give you this one.
Do we have a lot of bumblebees?
Oh, yeah.
You know, the larger ones?
Yeah, we do. I think Texas has 25 different species, but we do have bumblebees. Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about native bees versus honeybees. Are there people that just raise honey from native bees?
Native bees, most native bees, except for bumblebees, are solitary and they don't make honey. The only two, so bumblebees will make a little bit of honey, but you would get like a tablespoon from them. It's not worth stealing. And there's another type of a wasp called a Mexican honey wasp that will also produce honey, but their nest is not wax. It's like a paper nest. So to extract the honey from it, it's dirty. It's real easy to separate wax from liquid. So you don't, like indigenous people probably ate that honey, but we don't really bottle it or eat it. And it literally tastes like honey with dirt in it.
And I was going to make a comment about Tony's question about why would you do it?
It's
And my
fun.
first thought is, why do I go fly fishing?
Yeah. Because
I've
it's
got all this equipment at home and I go to the store to buy fish.
Yep. Well, I'm sorry the weather didn't let me get bees because that's always pretty fun, but we can't complain about rain. Thank goodness we're getting rain.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The thank you card. Thank you. And you're welcome to stay for lunch if you have time. All right. Thank you so much, Molly. We really appreciate you. Our next meeting is going to be Monday, June 2nd, and our speaker is Chris Suchan, the chief meteorologist from News 4. And he's going to talk from Channel 4. He's going to talk about like tornado season, thunderstorms, hurricanes, and all that kind of summer storms and stuff. Our lunch today is in the hospitality center, and before we go to lunch, we'll have a blessing from Lynn. Thank you.
You know, sometimes we do get songs stuck in our mind. And as I was driving in this morning, thinking bees, and I was thinking, I believe for every drop of rain that falls, a flower grows. And thank goodness for the bees for spreading that pollen and helping to feed us in God's marvelous way of making all that happen. So let's have our blessing, please. Heavenly Father, thank you for our time together. Thank you for this information. Thank you for Molly's skill with her presentation and her knowledge. We have so much to thank you for: the rain, the flowers, the food that comes to us through your gifts. Thank you for the bounty. Thank you for those who prepared our food for today, and bless us in the nourishment that it gives us. Help us to truly be your children and be a part of this community and walk our Christian life together in fellowship. Amen.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Enjoy your lunch.